Welcome to the Lost Debate, a show for political eclectics. I'm Ravi Gupta, and I just watched the presidential debate. I imagine you did too. The last time we did this, I was despondent, calling on Biden to drop out. I actually recorded midway through that debate because I said I need to see more. That was the beginning of a journey we've all been on that has taken us here through a lot of ups and downs throughout the summer, no matter your politics. And I'm generally the doomsayer when it comes to Democratic debates. For example, I didn't think Harris did particularly well in her vice presidential debate against Pence. I didn't think Biden did as well as he should have against Trump in the last debates, meaning last election, 2020. Obviously, he did terribly in 2024, as we all know. But this is one of those debates where I actually think Harris did incredibly well, and I think Trump did particularly poor. I think this was a near historic bad debate performance from Trump, and I thought it was a well above average performance from Kamala Harris, if not an excellent debate performance. There are a couple of things on high profile issues like the economy where she didn't quite land the plane that would have really taken it into, one of the best performances, but I thought she did incredibly well. Let's start with body language because I talked a lot about that during this debate history that we did, and I talked about, for instance, going all the way back to 1960. JFK versus Nixon, the cutaways really mattered there, and that was true in a lot of debates since, famously H.W. looking at his watch, most recently Biden looking sleepy, and Harris looked really good. She had a confident look the entire time. She was smiling. She looked like she was unbothered most of the time, and she was looking at Trump often while he was looking down, glowering, shaking his head, and as the debate went on, looked more and more angry and almost looked afraid to look at her. So I think that was not a good look for him. And I also think that Trump missed many, many opportunities to seize openings. And I think this started at the very first series of answers when the moderators asked Harris, are we better off now than we were 4 years ago? Which is a brutal question in many ways. She didn't answer it. She sidestepped it. And Trump didn't make her eat that question at all, didn't force her to answer it. And then that set us off on a whole path. As we'll get to, Trump, I thought, was particularly poor on the abortion question. He didn't have a lot of good source material. His record's bad, but I thought he performed poorly. Harris really stuck it to him there. And then really devastating for Trump is immigration, where it should have been an issue that is offense for him because of his own actions. The question starts with, why did you kill your own Republican bill? And then he went on to talk about crowd sizes because Harris baited him into that. There's a lot more here. Trump was twice asked about Ukraine. We'll get to that. He had this crazy line, which I imagine is going to get a lot of play, which is he has concepts of a plan, which really diffuses a lot of the, Harris doesn't have any policy stuff. There are certain things I just have major questions about, like Kamala Harris says she owns a gun. I don't think I've ever heard that before. What am I hearing out there? Well, we're gonna go to Twitter in a second, but I checked in with somebody on the Biden campaign, and what they told me is that their dials said that Harris won every answer except for the economy in Afghanistan, and the economy is one you really want to answer. So that's why I think, although I think she generally won this debate, that's the one you would have wanted to win if you could pick one. The middle of the debate was particularly bad for Trump on the dials. Abortion was particularly bad for Trump on the dials, and immigration was not as strong as he would have wanted it to be. So this was just not a really good debate for him. There's also, just for the debate nerds out there, Harris walked up to Trump and shook his hand. He didn't walk over to her, in part because in the Trump era, this is basically the first time we've never had handshakes. I think we haven't had one since 2016. And I'll leave it up to you, audience, to connect the dots on what the common denominator there is. But Harris, I think, decided to break that precedence, shook his hand. This is the first time these two have ever met each other. And they haven't met each other because Trump didn't attend the peaceful transfer of power in the inauguration, which is also another unprecedented move. Some tweets here of people who have different reactions here. John Heilman. And I tried to pick people who were particularly negative on the Biden performance because I think this shows you a bit of a shift. And, these are people I trust a little bit more to be more objective. Not all of these people meet that criteria, to be clear, but here are some. John Heilemann tweeted, "I've said it before and I'll say it again. The split screen with Harris is doing to Trump what the split screen with Biden did to Biden." Dave Portnoy of Barstool Sports, no liberal. I don't think this is going well for Trump so far at all. Probably doesn't help that it's a tag team match, but yeah, not great. This is a common theme I've heard from people on the right, which is they didn't like the moderation. I'll talk a little bit about that. Tom Nichols, we're not even halfway through, and I'm going to say I did not like Harris in her 2019 debate, and I didn't think she was very good in 2020, but she is blowing him out of the water here, and he is taking every bit of bait she's sending him. Got to call it like I see it. Tend to agree with that. David French, never Trumper. It's like she's debating MAGA Twitter come to life. Viktor Orban, dead pets. Ashley Babbitt, January 6th. She's debating cat turd. Ben Shapiro, and this tweet is truly a reflection of a lot of what I've seen from the right. The moderators are the story of the evening, and it ain't a good story. Generally speaking, I didn't see a lot of Trump is winning this debate. I saw a lot of people complaining about the moderators interrupting. Mark Elias, the attorney for the Democrats, said Trump is lying about 2020. Fact, he and his allies filed 65 cases. Fact, my team and I beat him 64 times. Fact, many were decided on the merits because Trump said they were all that they weren't on the merits and that there was lack of standing, which I think, we're not going to do a fact check here. We'd be here all night. But one of many things that were untrue that were said tonight. David Axelrod, Trump's self-image, his political calling card is strength. He was on defense that entire first hour. Kamala Harris pushed all of his hot buttons and he unraveled. Axe, a famous skeptic of Biden's last performance. Ian Bremmer, if you're a Trump supporter on TV tomorrow, you blame ABC. Harris winning easily here. I think that's what we're going to see. A lot of arguing with the refs. Sager and Jetty of Breaking Points, a conservative, said Trump whiffed abortion, then immigration, is rising to bait and is spending as much time as he can on all the issues that he has worse standing at with voters. I think he tweeted that when Trump was had an opportunity to say he lost the election and decided to go back into tinfoil hat land, which I think didn't win him many favors. A couple more reactions here. Nandita Bose, FWIW, I never know how to say that. The leader of the Taliban is, I'm not even going to be able to say that name, but it's a name not named Abdul, to be clear, who has been in charge since 2016, not a guy named Abdul, because Trump was kind of talking about this guy Abdul. And then Olivia Nuzzi from New York Magazine said, if you're the Abdul President Trump was negotiating with, please call me, please. Mike Murphy, he's literally having his own Biden debate disaster he's giving tonight to her. Important to note that most of the people I just mentioned in those tweets, I think the majority of them are Republicans. A lot of them are not Trump Republicans anymore, but they were people who are highly skeptical of the last Biden performance. And I'm really burying the lead here. By far the most important response to this debate is from one Taylor Swift, and I'm going to read this for you. Like many of you, I watched the debate tonight. If you haven't already, now is a great time to do your research on the issues at hand and the stances these candidates take on the topics that matter to you the most. As a voter, I make sure to watch and read everything I can about their proposed policies and plans for this country. Recently, I was made aware that AI of me falsely endorsing Donald Trump's presidential run was posted to his site. It really conjured up my fears around AI and the dangers of spreading misinformation. Brought me to the conclusion that I need to be very transparent about my actual plans for this election as a voter. The simplest way to combat misinformation is with the truth. I'll be casting my vote for Kamala Harris and Tim Walz in the 2024 presidential election. I'm voting for Kamala Harris because she fights for the rights and causes I believe in. I believe need a warrior to champion them. I think she is a steady-handed, gifted leader, and I believe we could accomplish so much more in this country if we're led by calm and not chaos. I was so heartened and impressed by her selection of a running mate, Tim Walz, who has been standing up for LGBTQ rights, IVF, and a woman's right to her own body. She says she made, and then she goes on to say she's done her research, she's made her choice, and she said it's basically up to you to do your own research and make your own choice. Fascinating. The prediction markets started tanking for Trump during this debate, and if I'm reading this correctly, he is below 50% now after this debate, where he was above 50% when he started. We'll keep an eye on that. But let's actually go to some of these clips here and examine some of the key moments here. Let's start with the economy, where Harris went in a direction I wouldn't have expected. So let's dissect this clip.
His economic plan, it's all about tax breaks for the richest people. I am offering what I describe as an opportunity economy, and the best economists in our country, if not the world, have reviewed our relative plans for the future of America. What Goldman Sachs has said is that Donald Trump's plan would make the economy worse, mine would strengthen the economy. What the Wharton School has said is Donald Trump's plan would actually explode the deficit. 16 Nobel laureates have described his economic plan as something that would increase inflation and by the middle of next year would invite a recession. You just have to look at where we are and where we stand on the issues. And I'd invite you to know that Donald Trump actually has no plan for you because he is more interested in defending himself than he is in looking out for you.
It's just a soundbite. They gave her that to say. Look, I went to the Wharton School of Finance, and many of those professors, the top professors, think my plan is a brilliant plan. It's a great plan. It's a plan that's going to bring up our worth, our value as a country. It's going to make people want to be able to go and work and create jobs and create a lot of good, solid money for our country. And just to finish off, she doesn't have a plan. She copied Biden's plan. And it's like 4 sentences, like run, spot, run. 4 sentences that are just, oh, we'll try and lower taxes. She doesn't have a plan. Take a look at her plan. She doesn't have a plan.
So this was probably the high watermark for Trump and low watermark for Harris. I think she had to take a glass of water after this. I think the idea of like Goldman Sachs says this or that, I think does very little for the American public. The Wharton line I thought was an odd choice, given... Like, it's one thing if you deliver that line saying, Wharton, where you went, even says my plan is better, but she gave him an opportunity to talk about the fact that he went to Wharton, which I think for, like, random Americans, like, oh, okay, Trump reminds me this guy has more education than maybe he sounds like. And then he had, like, these pithy one-liners about, this is where, this are lines that people gave you, run, spot, run, et cetera. And from what I understand, the dials were quite kind to Trump at this point. Problem for Trump is that we're talking about mere minutes into this debate, and that's high watermark, which, if you're going to have a high watermark, you want it to be early, but it was really downhill from here. Let's go to another section, and this is really the turning point of this debate. I tweeted out that this was the equivalent, for those of you who are football fans, of what happened in the Jaguars-Miami game this weekend when Travis Etienne fumbled in the end zone, and then everything was downhill from there, and Miami scored like 21 unanswered points in like one quarter. That's the equivalent of what happened here, except Harris had 3 quarters to really bounce back, but really drive home her message, and it really started with abortion. Let's go to this clip.
But her vice presidential pick says abortion in the 9th month is absolutely fine. He also says execution after birth. It's execution, no longer abortion, because the baby is born, is okay. And that's not okay with me, hence the vote. But what I did is something for 52 years. They've been trying to get Roe v. Wade into the states. And through the genius and heart and strength of 6 Supreme Court justices, we were able to do that. Now, I believe in the exceptions for rape, incest, and life of the mother. I believe strongly in it. Ronald Reagan did also. 85% of Republicans do. Exceptions. Very important. But we were able to get it, and now states are voting on it. And for the first time, you're going to see, look, this is an issue that's torn our country apart for 52 years. Every legal scholar, every Democrat, every Republican, liberal, conservative, they all wanted this issue to be brought back to the states where the people could vote. And that's what happened. Now, Ohio, the vote was somewhat liberal. Kansas, the vote was somewhat liberal, much more liberal than people would have thought. But each individual state is voting. It's the vote of the people now. It's not tied up in the federal government. I did a great service in doing it. It took courage to do it. And the Supreme Court had great courage in doing it. And I give tremendous credit to those 6 justices.
There is no state in this country where it is legal to kill a baby after it's born.
So a couple things about this exchange. Number one is that Trump just is really hard to follow. I think he was hard to follow throughout the debate, and I think we forget that about him. He just says a lot of things. They're often not, his points are not connected to the point he made before. And this wasn't even close to the hardest to follow answer that we've had. Second is that he's calling attention to his own Supreme Court picks and their moves, which is just deeply unpopular. And so when we hear things like the dials were off the charts on this, and then Harris's, I think, particularly strong rebuttal on this, then this was particularly bad for Trump. And then I think the exaggerations here, I'm not sure there's a single American out there who is aware of people executing children after birth and not spending the rest of their lives in prison. And so it's such an extreme claim that, we'll spend time figuring out where he came up with this and who floated it and when and what state or whatever. But it's such an extreme claim that it just completely loses credibility with the American public, because it's just not what they're struggling with. Like, if some legislator somewhere proposed something crazy, right, that is just going to go over the heads of the American public, and they're going to be like, you're obfuscating. Now, the other thing that's interesting about this is that this is the first time that the moderator, from what I understand, corrected Trump. It happened a few more times. And I think some people went crazy over this. I generally don't like moderators correcting the candidates. I think that's the job of the other candidates. Do I really care one way or another here? No, because I'm fairly certain Harris would have made that correction herself afterwards. But the bigger thing is, don't say false and misleading things, and you won't have to be corrected. And Trump, if they corrected every false and misleading thing Trump said in this debate, they would have corrected him 1,000 times. And so I think that's really on him. I also think if you think of Trump's worst moments here, the things that were bad about them weren't that he was corrected. It was just the words that were coming out of his mouth. And if you look at the charts of who spoke the most during this debate, Trump spoke a lot more, right? So if Harris had lost this debate, you could imagine them complaining that the moderators let Trump speak more than she did, and that there were various moments, especially towards the end of the debate, where she tried to jump in, and the moderators wouldn't give her extra time. All right, let's go to when Harris was talking about Trump's rallies.
And I'm going to actually do something really unusual, and I'm going to invite you to attend one of Donald Trump's rallies, because it's a really interesting thing to watch. You will see during the course of his rallies, he talks about fictional characters like Hannibal Lecter. He will talk about windmills cause cancer. And what you will also notice is that people start leaving his rallies early out of exhaustion and boredom. And I will tell you, the one thing you will not hear him talk about is you. You will not hear him talk about your needs, your dreams, and your desires. And I'll tell you, I believe you deserve a president who actually puts you first, and I pledge to you that I will.
So this was interesting, and I think this was, she did this a few times where she would bring something up like the people in Trump's cabinet that are leaving, or his rallies and people leaving his rallies and all this, and she would do it at strategic points. In this case, I believe it was during the immigration segment. And what happened? Trump started talking about his rally sizes instead of his contrast on immigration. Now, I think immigration is muddy for him because of what he did on what he did with the border bill, and that was actually the framing of one of the questions, and that's on him, really. But he couldn't even spend a lot of time on offense on this issue because he took debate about his rally sizes. Let's go to a riff Trump had on immigration here.
First, let me respond as to the
Please.
rallies. She said people start leaving. People don't go to her rallies. There's no reason to go. And the people that do go, she's bussing them in and paying them to be there, and then showing them in a different light. So she can't talk about that. People don't leave my rallies. We have the biggest rallies, the most incredible rallies in the history of politics. That's because people want to take their country back. Our country is being lost. We're a failing nation. And it happened 3.5 years ago. And what's going on here, you're going to end up in World War III, just to go into another subject. What they have done to our country by allowing these millions and millions of people to come into our country, and look at what's happening to the towns all over the United States. And a lot of towns don't want to talk. It's not going to be Aurora or Springfield. A lot of towns don't want to talk about it because they're so embarrassed by it. In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there. And this is what's happening in our country, and it's a shame. As far as rallies are concerned, as far as the reason they go is they like what I say. They want to bring our country back. They want to make America great again. It's a very simple phrase, make America great again. She's destroying this country, and if she becomes president, this country doesn't have a chance of success. Not only success, we'll end up being Venezuela on steroids.
I just want to clarify here. You bring up Springfield, Ohio, and ABC News did reach out to the city manager there. He told us there have been no credible reports of specific claims of pets being harmed, injured, or abused by individuals within the immigrant community.
Well, I've seen people on television.
Let me just say here, this is the
people on television say my dog was taken and used for food. So maybe he said that, and maybe that's a good thing to say for a city manager.
I'm not taking this from
but
television.
But the people
I'm
on
taking it from
television
the city
saying
manager.
their dog was eaten by the people that went there.
Again, the Springfield city manager says there's no evidence of that. Vice.
So that's Trump's immigration answer on his purported strongest issue. Let's go to January 6th.
I was at the Capitol on January 6th. I was the vice president-elect. I was also an acting senator. I was there. And on that day, the President of the United States incited a violent mob to attack our nation's capital, to desecrate our nation's capital. On that day, 140 law enforcement officers were injured, and some died. And understand, the former president has been indicted and impeached for exactly that reason. But this is not an isolated situation. Let's remember Charlottesville, where there was a mob of people carrying tiki torches, spewing anti-Semitic hate. And what did the president then at the time say? There were fine people on each side. Let's remember that when it came to the Proud Boys, a militia, the president said, the former president said, stand back and stand by. So for everyone watching who remembers what January 6th was, I say we don't have to go back. Let's not go back. We're not going back. It's time to turn the page. And if that was a bridge too far for you, well, there is a place in our campaign for you to stand for country, to stand for our democracy, to stand for rule of law, and to end the chaos, and to end the approach that is about attacking the foundations of our democracy because you don't like the outcome. And be clear on that point. Donald Trump, the candidate, has said in this election there will be a bloodbath if this and the outcome of this election is not to his liking. Let's turn the page on this. Let's not go back. Let's chart a course for the future and not go backwards to the past.
So I think Trump, and the dials show this, even his most ardent supporters were relatively quiet during these periods of time when we talked about January 6th, where he was asked about whether he won the last election. This is just horrendous territory for Trump if he's unwilling to soften his positions. And he had an opportunity elsewhere to clarify that he thinks he lost the last election, which he has said publicly many times over the past week, as we talked about on the last debate show. But he now has walked back his walk back again. It reminds me of abortion. It's like, why do all this work to moderate your position, to say you lost the election, or to moderate your position on abortion if you're just going to flip back? It actually does more damage than doing nothing at all. And it also just shows how focused he is on the past. And I think that Harris's line about being focused on the future, she did that a lot. It's just a very simple one. Like, a lot of Americans don't want a president who's, so focused on an election he lost, still claiming he lost it. I think people of all stripes believe in the peaceful transfer of power. They don't like it when cops are being beat up. And in his answer prior to Harris's response here, Trump talked about Ashley Babbitt, the person who's one of his supporters who was killed, didn't talk about the 100+ officers who were injured and some who died. And, there are debates about did they die because of what happened that day? Was it inflicted by stress? Whatever you believe, there are officers who died with some fairly strong evidence that it was a result of that day, but over 100 injured. Couldn't really waste breath on that. That just seems really notable to me as somebody who's claiming to be pro-cop and pro-law and order. Let's go to another clip here. We have a clip of Trump on that. There was a whole exchange about Trump and foreign leaders. Let's go to this clip.
Donald Trump was fired by 81 million people. So let's be clear about that. And clearly he is having a very difficult time processing that. But we cannot afford to have a president of the United States who attempts, as he did in the past, to upend the will of the voters in a free and fair election. And I'm going to tell you that I have traveled the world as Vice President of the United States, and world leaders are laughing at Donald Trump. I have talked with military leaders, some of whom worked with you, and they say you're a disgrace. And when you then talk in this way in a presidential debate and deny what over and over again are court cases you have lost because you did, in fact, lose that election, it leads one to believe that perhaps we do not have in the candidate to my right the temperament or the ability to not be confused about fact.
So that line in particular, when she talked about he's having a hard time processing that loss, it was just a very interesting choice of words from Harris. I thought as the debate sort of rounded out at the end, Trump regained a little bit of his footing. And I think his closing statement around you had all this time and you talk about all these plans, how come you didn't do them, is something that I think he would have been wise to bring out far earlier in response to a lot of the things Harris was saying. Obviously, if you're Harris, the response is you were president too, but at least like this is a kind of shorthand for Trump that can diffuse a lot of Harris's forward-looking momentum, right? She's constantly pointing to the future, and that's one way for him to muddy it up. And so this is the debate. I mean, we could talk forever about, a lot of the different clips here, but a lot of you just watched this debate, so we don't need to go through all of them. But my sense here is this debate is going to help Harris and it's going to hurt Trump. It wasn't a knockout blow, but I thought it was a particularly bad night for Trump. And I think Harris did exactly what she needed to do, with the exception of nailing the economic answers. The dials weren't great on Afghanistan either, but I'm not sure that's rising to the level. But I think my sense is in the next week or so, you'll probably see a little bit of movement back in the direction of Harris in these polls that have seemed to be, at least her momentum seemed to be cooling in the past week. So interesting night, not the night I think Trump's people expected. I suspect you will not get another debate after this because I don't think Harris's team will want one, because generally speaking, if you win a debate and you've got momentum, which I got to think she would have some coming out of this debate, that you have more to lose from a debate than you have to gain. But you never know. It could be in their estimation that Trump was bad enough tonight that they would love to get another shot at him closer to the election so that these perceptions can stick, although we are just a few weeks away from Pennsylvania early vote, so you never know. It's also worth noting that Trump has done more presidential debates or 6 days, our producer Kate is saying. Wow. And so damage done, probably. It's also worth noting that Trump has had more presidential debates. He's participated in more presidential debates than anybody in history. So you'd expect him to be really good at this. But clearly he perhaps didn't prepare as well as he should have for tonight. That's all. Those are my immediate reactions. Thank you for listening. And we'll be back later this week.